Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for participating in today's event, which is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. I am Sara Chieffo, Vice President of Government Affairs at the League of Conservation Voters, and we have a truly amazing group of panelists here with us today who are leading the national effort to replace our kids' dirty diesel school buses with clean electric ones, with the core focus on making sure those benefits are first delivered to the low-income communities and communities of color hardest hit by climate change and most impacted by toxic pollution. As a mom of two young daughters, this topic is near and dear to my heart. We're going to be discussing the health, environmental, and community benefits of transitioning from dirty diesel to pollution-free electric school buses. And we're also going to be talking about how we're building momentum in Congress for the Clean Commute for Kids Act that one of our panelists, Congresswoman Johana Hayes, is leading. Let's put it simply, people. Children and communities have a right to breathe clean air, and yet today, far too few have that fundamental right. Right now, nearly all of the school children who ride school buses, total of 480,000 school buses, kids who ride these school buses every day are exposed to dirty diesel exhaust. That means 25 million children across our country are exposed to pollution, the dangerous toxins in this diesel pollution that can cause asthma, heart and lung disease, and cancer, can also impact their ability to learn that day in school. Over the past 4 years, LCV's Chispa program has worked to address this public health issue by advocating for the Volkswagen settlement funds to be used to electrify school buses in states. However, there's an urgent need for the federal government to take action to support and advance this effort to transition from dirty diesel school buses to clean electric ones. In order to truly safeguard the health of these 25 million children riding school buses every day, we must act at a much bigger scale than we've been able to. Currently, our champions in Congress, like Congresswoman Hayes, are leading the way to make this happen by introducing and leading on legislation to fund and support the transition, the wholesale transition to electric school buses. The Biden-Harris administration has also voiced support for electrifying the school bus fleet in the American Jobs Plan. We're at a really exciting moment in this campaign. And in fact, even underscoring their support for it, we saw Vice President Harris tout this need to transition by touring a manufacturing plant in North Carolina to see firsthand how switching to electric school buses can also create high quality, good paying union jobs. Our panelists are going to discuss how we can help build on the state level progress led by LCV's Chispa program to secure this federal funding and support a transition to electric school buses once and for all. With that opening, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Johana Hayes. She's the first African-American woman and first African-American Democrat to ever represent Connecticut in Congress. And since joining the House of Representatives in 2018, she has jumped right in as a true leader, leading on many issues, including making sure every kid has a ride to school. Her leadership has played a significant role in making this pollution-free clean school buses a nationwide issue and building the momentum for the Biden-Harris administration to embrace it in the American Jobs Plan, with their call for a full $20 billion over this to invest in this transition over the next 8 years. We're absolutely thrilled to have her here today to talk about how important this issue is to her, for her personal level, and also to building healthier communities. With that glowing introduction, Congresswoman Hayes, it's my pleasure to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for doing this and for all of your leadership on this very important issue. I am a teacher. I came to Congress as a teacher, but as a teacher, I recognize that there are so many intersections that are a part of education. And before I could even begin to start teaching, my kids had to get to me. And most of those kids came to me by school bus, and standing in a bus line and waiting for kids to get off the bus and just being on buses, going on field trips with kids, you recognize just the incredible amount of toxic emissions that these kids are exposed to, and the direct link to many of their health issues, increased asthma and chronic lung conditions, and so many other things. I learned very early in my career as an educator that so many of my student absences at my school were attributed to asthma and other health conditions and hospitalizations. So these are all things that as we begin to look forward to how do we modernize and improve our education system and our delivery of services, we have to have a larger and more broad conversation about making sure that kids are healthy and that we make the very simple step of making their ride to school safe. Reducing emissions in the transportation sector has to start with school buses. As the nation's largest form of mass transportation and one of the single largest polluters of our atmosphere, diesel school buses are a threat to children's health, community resilience, and environmental sustainability. A large investment is necessary to kickstart this industry. Not only will this bring the prices of buses down, but it will ensure buses are economically feasible for lower income districts. Currently, an electric school bus can cost up to $400,000 or 2.5 times the amount of a diesel school bus. Electrifying our school bus fleet protects the health of children and bus drivers. It protects our communities. Diesel fumes increase risks of asthma, cardiovascular disease, hospitalization, and dementia in both adults and children. This is an environmental justice issue. My legislation prioritizes these communities and these children with long overdue environmental and health disparities. National deployment of electrical school buses will not only expand our nation's electric grid, but will provide opportunities to fortify it. Electric batteries on school buses can be used for numerous purposes, including as backup generators for schools in case of emergencies, because they spend most of their time out of transit. Both of my pieces of legislation account for these purposes by requiring the Department of Energy to pursue these uses and allow funds to go towards the infrastructure necessary to deploy electric school buses. There are so many questions surrounding this conversation, and there really is a reluctance to make a full shift from our current bus fleet to what we know will be better for not only our children and our communities, but for the environment. So that's going to take some legislative actions and some funding to support it. And I am so just happy to be a leader in that area and to work with my colleagues to insist that every piece of legislation that comes out that has to do with infrastructure, with schools, with transportation, that we are considering making sure that our children are protected, and switching over the school fleet is part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Hayes. As all of our participants can see, we can have no better champion and leader for these issues than the triple threat mom, teacher, Congresswoman Johana Hayes. With that, I'd love to introduce our amazing panelists. We have 3 panelists joining us today. First is Johanna Vicente, who is Chispa's National Senior Director, where she works to organize Latinx communities across the country to demand the systemic changes that are needed for people of color to thrive in healthy, sustainable environments, including leading the work to fight for clean rides for kids. She's a proud Ecuadorian immigrant and a true leader in the environmental movement. Throughout her career, Johana has been a fierce advocate for centering the leadership of people of color in the environmental movement. On a personal note, I'm so happy to be able to learn from and work alongside Johana. Before her time at LCV Chispa program, she was a community organizer with the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. Our second panelist is Alex Rodriguez, who serves as climate advocate for Save the Sound, where he is responsible for youth mobilization. Always important, never more so than right now. He's also responsible for supporting climate-related communications, coalition building, community engagement, and legislative advocacy. Prior to joining Save the Sound, Alex served as a community organizer in the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, bringing a home district connection for you, Congresswoman Hayes. Finally, we have Trisha Dello, Iacono, who is the National Field and Legislative Manager for Clean Air, for Moms Clean Air Force, where she brings the voices and the stories of concerned parents from across the country to members of Congress to advocate for policies that protect kids' health. Her work is deeply personal to her. One of her sons has a chronic health issue due to his exposure to toxic chemicals in their community. She's turned that into true being an advocacy force nationwide, and she's made it her life's mission to protect all children, to ensure they have clean air and are protected from toxic chemicals. With that, I'd love to open it up with the first question for our panel, which is telling us a little bit more about why transition to clean school buses matter to you, and how did you get involved in advocating for it? I'll start with you, Johana.
Thank you, Sarah, and hi everyone, welcome. Yeah, I think for me, this work is definitely personal. As Sarah said, I used to be an organizer in Maryland, and while I was working there, working with Latino families, specifically Latinx Latino immigrant moms, I think the true impact of climate change, of air pollution, was definitely notable there, right? And so we saw a lot of kids with respiratory issues, with asthma, a lot of concerned mothers who were trying to fight for their health of their children. And so, I think for us, clean school buses was a tangible solution to address the very real issues that communities were facing on the ground, which is why in 2016, we launched the Clean Buses for Healthy Niños campaign to address just that and make sure that we were thinking about transitioning to electric school buses. And thanks to the leadership of many moms on the ground, of decision makers like Representative Hayes, we are where we are today, of having such an incredible momentum for bold solutions for clean ride for kids. So that's very exciting. And on a personal note, I think my dream is for my niece to be able to ride her very first school bus to be an electric one. So, I aim to work towards that goal.
Fantastic, Johana. Thank you. Alex?
It's a delight to be here amongst colleagues, reigniting this talk on clean school buses. I remember when I joined the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters in 2017, I had learned about the campaign to electrify school buses, and I was very enthusiastic about it. That first year of the campaign, we had coordinated with Johana and all of the Chispa program staff on coordinated petition deliveries. In Connecticut, we had delivered over 2,000 petitions in support of clean school buses to then Governor Malloy. Talking to people on the ground in the community, especially residents in Middletown, the city of Middletown, were very enthusiastic about the Clean School Buses campaign. So much so that we were able to work with moms, community activists, and eventually DATCO School Bus Company to electrify, to bring the first electric school bus to Connecticut. It was very rewarding to see that come to fruition this past year. It happened in February where they unveiled the electric school bus. And I brought my family to the event, and my nieces and my nephew, they got to see this new technology come about. And so it was very rewarding. Any technology that helps kids breathe cleaner air and protects Madre Tierra, that is a worthwhile investment. Good to be here.
Thank you, Alex. And so incredible in a few short years to be from delivering petitions to the governor to showing your niece and nephew the electric bus in person. So thank you for your advocacy. Trisha?
Hey, everyone. So I am a mom to 4 young children. So you can imagine how talking about an iconic yellow school bus and that, and I think we're all familiar of the smell of the diesel pollution that it gives off. But unfortunately, also in my work, I see the impact that the diesel pollution has on children's health. We actually work with families across the country, especially in communities that are, heavily polluted with other pollution sources. And we have moms who also are experiencing impacts from climate change and who live in areas with where the wildfires can be pretty troublesome over the summer. And we have some moms who will not put their children on the bus if the air quality in their communities due to the wildfires or other pollution sources are elevated, because we know that the pollution inside the bus can be up to 10 times worse than outside the bus. And to me, that statistic really resonated in the stories of our moms that talk about not being able to put their child on the yellow bus to go to school because of the level of pollution and how it could exacerbate their asthma symptoms. And I just had a mom this morning tell me a story about how she actually had to, they were on a field trip and they were in the back of the bus, and the child actually had an asthma attack on the bus. And so that can be really scary, especially as we think about some of these children's trips to and from school can be up to an hour long. I know my My one son has almost an hour commute back and forth. So it's been really exciting this Congress to see Representative Hayes's leadership on this topic, and to know that there are leaders like Representative Hayes in Congress and our administration who are prioritizing this transition that we need so desperately, and especially looking to make sure that there's federal support in environmental justice communities.
Thank you, Trisha. You're definitely a mom inspiration and such a fierce advocate. And she's also, I've sat in many hearings where Trisha's had all 4 children with her, and I don't know how she does it. I have to get some tips from you. So with that, I'd love to direct our next question back to you, Congressman Hayes, and tell our audience a little bit about some of the roadblocks that schools are facing in transitioning to clean school buses, and how this legislation helps alleviate that.
Well, I'll first say that thank you all for all of your perspectives. And I'm not someone who came to this issue or through personal experience. It just, I became interested and saw different things. There was a point in my school district where we were trying to track student absenteeism for a report for the governor. And I was shocked to find out that the #1 cause of absenteeism amongst our students was hospitalization for asthma-related attacks, which really opened my eyes and got me to thinking about it. And then here in Congress, as I started to dive deep into this issue, I found that a 2014 study from the University of Michigan highlighted 5 urban communities in Connecticut as the worst in the nation for racial disparity in pollution exposure. That was devastating for me to have districts that I represent on this list of the worst in the nation for environmental justice and pollution for underserved communities. So one of my very first pieces of legislation, I introduced the Clean School Bus Act and the Clean Commute for Kids. And to answer your question, what are the barriers? Whenever I would talk to someone, they would talk about the roadblocks and financing a complete shift of such a large fleet, that districts didn't have the money to build the capital to purchase the buses or the infrastructure for the charging stations, for replacing batteries, for they would have to get technicians and all the other people. That this required a complete mindset. So while I cared about the issue, I also recognized that in Congress, I had a little bit more agency. So if money was the issue, how about now I work for the organization that appropriates federal dollars? The Clean School Bus Act would invest about $1 billion over 5 years. And the Clean Commute for Kids, that's through the Department of Energy, the Clean Commute for Kids is $25 billion. So even that, as large as those numbers sound, is not enough to completely shift the fleet, but it's enough to start. And it supports local districts in doing what they want to do and what they know is the right thing to do, but they cannot do that without federal support. So I'm very excited that there's been indication in the last couple pieces of legislation, and I haven't heard about the new infrastructure bill, but even in the transportation package, as I'm going through it, there is language that begins to acknowledge that we need to address the commute for kids. There is actually language that mirrors the legislation that I propose. So it's nice to be in a place where people are beginning to appreciate that we cannot just put our kids on but like this is an easy one. There are so many environmental factors that we cannot control, but this is an easy one. So it just takes not only the political will, but legislators who believe that it's important enough to put the funding behind it. So that was what I saw as the biggest barrier, was districts were saying, we'd love to do it, but we can't afford to do it.
So well said, Congresswoman. Johana, Alex, or Trisha, anything to add on that question of roadblocks? I almost said school blocks, sorry, school roadblocks.
This is Trisha. I'll jump in. I will echo the need, and we hear this over and over again, that to make sure that we're prioritizing and getting the resources to environmental justice communities and the communities that are already so hard hit by other pollution sources. Those are the communities that need this support, and this should be a priority. And I know that's been a priority for the administration and Vice President Harris as well, and when she was in the Senate. The other thing I'll say is, and the representative touched on this, is it's not just the funding for the school buses. It's also making sure that the infrastructure and any construction that's needed at the schools is also part of the funding that is provided. A lot of times, you'll hear that there was money for the buses, but then there wasn't, no guidance on the infrastructure that's needed and the resources that go along with that. So making sure that these communities have all of the resources and the funding and the support that they need to make this transition should be a priority.
I just want to jump in and say both of the bills that I introduced prioritize low-income communities, and I'm very specific about this isn't just a blanket pilot where everyone can try it out and see how it works. We have to start first in the communities that need the most help, and the language is very specific to your point that we prioritize the kids who are most disproportionately impacted by the pollutants that come out of our buses.
Thank you so much for putting equity at the center of this legislation and at your commitment to delivering it on this transition. Alex?
To Representative Hayes and Trisha's point, the sources of funding are a major obstacle in our push to electrify school buses in Connecticut. The majority of Connecticut school districts do not own their own buses. That is another challenge that I encountered in this campaign, and another couple of things is the grid, the electric grid that we have in Connecticut. It needs to be transformed in a way to be able to truly accommodate this electrification. We're pushing for stronger energy efficiency measures in Connecticut. We're pushing our Public Utilities Regulatory Authority and Energy Efficiency Board to, really work with contractors and make sure that every building is properly weatherized and then eventually solarized to be able to accommodate this transformation. And then the last thing I'll say is there are fossil fuel interests lobbying all government agencies in contrast to our advocacy. I delivered a presentation in support of clean school buses and our push for the Volkswagen mitigation funds to go toward clean school buses. I delivered this presentation at the EPA a couple of years ago, EPA Region 1, and there were many propane and clean diesel hecklers at that conference. They were angry with me because they realize that their time is coming. We are pushing for something that is truly clean, that is truly beneficial for not only our kids' health, but from a jobs point of view as well. Clean school buses are a part of the green economy that we're all fighting for. And so I want to thank Congresswoman Hayes for your leadership, for fighting the opposition there. And I know the rest of the Connecticut delegation is very supportive of the act that you've championed.
Well, can I just say, I'm really sorry, but can I just say this idea, because this is being presented as a binary choice. The fact that you're going to talk about something that is environmentally conscious, has health implications for our children, and there are hecklers there. There's fear surrounding any type of transition. People think that we're going to lose jobs or it's going to change our communities. This industry will create a whole new set of jobs. It will be a different boost for our economy. It will support and promote the Connecticut economy and really be good stewards of our environment. And people can work together. We just secured a grant for $10 million for the city of Waterbury for their public transportation, not school buses. However, that grant includes the infrastructure for charging stations, which a bus company could also use. So as we begin to build up our communities, we're creating a ripple effect that can expand out and really create partnerships. I mean, this is a conversation. The coal industry is not coming back. This is a conversation where you have to modernize and evolve and really take stock of the data and what the information is telling us and conduct ourselves accordingly. So there's nothing to heckle here. This is not putting one industry out of business to start another one. This is saying we are making a responsible transition that not only is facilitated by our children's health, but also by the lessons and the demands that the environment are giving us back. This is not, there really is no choice here. We can no longer take the path of least resistance and say, well, this is cheaper and we don't care what the outcomes are. That happened for way too long. And now we are left to mitigate the consequences of that. So I can't imagine why anyone who, I don't even want to say who has children, anyone who takes a deep breath would be heckling this type of commitment to improvements in our community.
So powerfully said. And I think it's just an example of how our opponents in the fossil fuel industry are really trying to cling on to a vision of the past and try to fearmonger. And will go to great lengths to lie and obfuscate, as they've done with saying the climate denial movement and funding all of that. Congressman Hayes, I know we are over your time. I wanted to give you one last space here for some closing remarks, and then a few more minutes with our panelists.
Yes, I'm so sorry. They just called the vote, so I do have to run. But I have a really really supportive Connecticut delegation. But I would encourage you to use whatever agency you have to reach out to people and continue to just promote the importance of this type of legislation and the importance of their representatives and their senators signing on, because this is something that has to be done. Our children cannot wait. And I know this as a classroom teacher, our kids can't wait for a 25-year plan. They're expecting the adults to get it right now. So I will continue to make sure that we are including legislation that really is twofold, that is sustainable, that is supportive of our children, that boosts our economy and all those things. And those are all absolutes for me. So I've tried really hard to make sure that language stayed in the infrastructure plan and the jobs plan and the transportation plan. And so far I've been successful, and that only happens because there are strong advocates like you on the other side. Public sentiment is everything here. You know, you have made your voice so loud and so incredibly powerful that what 5 years ago seemed like radical concepts to talk about preserving and protecting the environment are mainstream ideas that everyone knows. You have to get on board with this, because as a representative of your community, this is what your community wants. So thank you for your advocacy and all the work that you do, and for continuing to support me in this role.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. We are better off for your leadership and look forward to getting this across the goal line together.
Yeah.
Great. And that's the vote for votes. Well, with those powerful remarks, I'd like to transition us to a question for our panelists, who are all really accomplished and powerful organizers and activists and focused on lifting up community leadership and building community voices into this fight. Can we spend a minute just talking about how people who are listening into this Facebook Live, who are tuned in here, can get involved in making clean, healthy school buses a reality for every kid? What are some ways that they can get more involved? Trish, let's start with you, Trisha.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So I'm excited to say, you know, Moms Clean Air Force has been really engaged on this issue on the ground, working with partners. LCV and Chispa has been really wonderful partners on this, and looking at ways that we can change the narrative and instead of making this, you know, a partisan issue and about, you know, I think some of the things that Alex was talking about, but instead really noting the need for this transition to ensure that our kids have healthy air to breathe. And that's really what it's all about. So this summer, we moms are going on a little bus tour, and we are going into cities across the country with our organizers on the ground and partnering with some of the electric school bus manufacturers to show communities what it's like to have an EV school bus in their community, to help them be inspired to advocate for the need for electric school buses, and hope that we can really drum up broad and diverse support across the country to show our lawmakers that moms and kids want this transition now.
Thank you, Trisha. That's exciting. Sign me up for the bus tour.
There, you're in.
Thoughts on how folks can get more engaged in this campaign, Alex?
Yes, to everybody in Connecticut and really in the Northeast watching this right now, I would implore you to reach out to your congressional offices and ask for your congressperson's support for the Clean Commute for Kids Act, because that is a vital piece of legislation that will not only support the health of our children and our communities, but support a green economy and mitigate the climate crisis. In addition, I would also implore you to contact your government agencies, your governor, and ask them where they stand on the Transportation and Climate Initiative. This is a regional cap and invest program being led by several jurisdictions across the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C. have all signed the MOU. But we need legislative action in many of these areas. In addition to that, my organization, Save the Sound, has been working with our partner groups in Connecticut to make sure that the Transportation and Climate Initiative becomes a reality. We are pushing our Senate and House leadership to fully implement this initiative, because we believe that polluters should be held accountable to the pollution and destruction that they cause, and that those pollution allowances should be reinvested into clean transportation projects such as electric school buses and electric transit buses. So to everybody at home, please contact your governor, contact your state agencies, and get them to sign on to the Transportation and Climate Initiative.
Thank you, Alex. Johana, advice for our listeners about how to get more engaged here.
Yes, there's a number of ways you can get involved. I think, Clean Bright for Kids started as a local issue, right? It was moms organizing on the ground. So I definitely encourage people who are watching these to get together with your neighbors, with your community, and demand your decision makers to prioritize the health of our kids and invest in electric school buses. The other thing that you can do is follow us on social media. We definitely post a lot of opportunities there at Chispa LCV and all of our social media platforms. And lastly, we are doing a petition to support the Clean Commute for Kids Act. And so we ask you to sign the petition and ask your decision makers to support that piece of legislation and to demand bolder investments for our kids at the federal level to be able to provide the funding that's necessary to be able to have a transition to electric school buses.
Thank you, Johana, Alex, and Trisha. We are at the end of our time, but I'd like to turn it back over to you for a rapid fire 30-second closing out comments for our listeners today. And thank you again for all of your incredible work. Let's start with Trisha again.
Thanks, Sarah. Just 30 seconds. We really need Congress to pass, bold legislation that addresses transitioning our diesel school buses to electric.
Thank you, Trisha. I think you're going to yield a few of those seconds over to Alex.
Climate crisis is an existential threat, is the most pressing issue in our lifetime. We need Congress to support the Clean Commute for Kids Act and support a clean transportation future.
Thank you, Alex. And Johana.
I definitely agree with what has been said. We need 25 million for 25 million children, or 25 billion for 25 million children. So please support the Clean Commute for Kids Act and call your decision makers, demand that our kids' health is protected, and invest in electric school buses.
Thank you so much for all your time today, Johana, Alex, Trisha, and Congresswoman Hayes for being such an incredible leader on these issues. This really is the time to seize this historic opportunity to deliver a clean ride for all of our kids. And now is the time to seize this moment. So thank you all for your interest and your engagement here. You heard it here. Contact your members of Congress, contact your governors, sign the petition from Chispa, lend your voice to this fight. Now is the time to get it done, and we're only going to do it if we're all working together. So thank you all for your time today, and keep up the fight.